Hello everyone and welcome to another Commander Tactics Deck Tech. My name's Pope. Before we dive into today's deck, I wanted to let everyone know that we have launched a new Discord to create a new space to talk about Commander, help us choose which deck techs we brew next, and much more. It's open to anyone, although patrons will get some additional perks, and you can find a link to join down in the description of this video. But now, let's dive into this rather insane deck tech. And in today's deck, we are going to be brewing around some very unique and unusual restrictions. In Ikoria Lair of Behemoths, we got a ton of cool new commanders printed as companions, but running them as companions proves to be quite challenging given the restrictions they demand. One in particular stood out to me, and that was Umori the Collector. Umori as a companion requires all non-land cards in our deck to share a card type, meaning every card has to be a creature or instant or artifact. You get the idea. I put this brew on the back burner until I saw one specific card get previewed in Core 21. This one card set in motion what is about to be the deck tech you're seeing before you. That card was Hooded Blightfang. This 1/4 snake got me thinking about the infamous and rather unreliable idea that is Deathtouch Tribal. Fast forward a few weeks now, and I'm so excited to present to you this all-creature Deathtouch Umori Commander deck tech. Without anything besides creatures at our disposal, I began breaking down our creatures into normal deck tech roadmap like usual. Ramp, card advantage, removal, synergies, and utility. Through the effect and abilities of our creatures, we're able to build a fully functional deck satisfying the needs of each of these categories. But first we need to address who will actually be the commander of this squad of Golgari goons, and that is the partner commander of Virtus the Veiled and Gorm the Great. This duo synergizes great with what our deck aims to accomplish, but also allows our deck to function perfectly with or without them on the battlefield. Virtus has Deathtouch and says whenever he deals combat damage to a player, that player loses half of their life. This is an extremely potent ability that we can go for, but is definitely not the main focus of our win conditions. Gorm has Vigilance and on a 2/7 body and must be blocked when he attacks by at least 2 creatures. Gorm will help us get in when we want to and keep our life total safe in the process. But now, without any further ado, let us dive in taking a look at the Deathtouch Synergy creatures we'll be presenting our opponents. One quick note before we go any further, since we will be taking a look at every single card in this deck, we'll be moving at a rather quick pace in order to not have an hour-long video. If you have any questions about specific choices, drop them down in the comments section below and I'll be happy to talk through why I made the selections I did. But now let's kick things off, starting off with 3 absolute bombs in this deck, and that is Asereth the Awakener, Questing Beast, and Ronus the Indomitable. Asereth costing 3 mana, we get a 3/3 body with Deathtouch of course, and whenever it attacks we can pay X to reanimate any creature card in our graveyard with CMC X or less. Questing Beast is a huge beater, has Vigilance, has Haste, and Deathtouch, so it can get in for that Deathtouch damage and cannot be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. And of course, when he gets in to deal combat damage, we can also then deal that damage to a planeswalker they control as well. And Ronus the Indomitable, Deathtouch, and Indestructible, able to pump another creature for +2/+0 for only 3 mana, and he can't attack or block unless we do have a 4 power creature in play. Next up, we got 3 powerful ETB effects with Deathtouch, and that is God Eternal Ronus, Gaunty Lord of Luxury, and Embodiment of Agonies. God Eternal Ronus on ETB is going to double the power of each creature we control until the end of turn. They all gain Vigilance as well. And of course, if God Eternal Ronus should die or get exiled, we can then put him back into our library third from the top. And then we have Gaunty Lord of Luxury with an effect I love so much. Whenever he enters the battlefield, we get to look at the top 4 cards of an opponent's library, exile one of them face down, and then we can cast that card from exile any time we want, spending any mana to cast it. I love this effect. It allows us to play mind games with our opponents and cast some spells we normally wouldn't have access to. And then Embodiment of Agonies, a brand new card out of Core 20, has flying on top of its Deathtouch, and whenever it enters the battlefield, it gets a +1 counter for each different CMC among non-land permanent cards in our graveyard. While Dredge and Mill is definitely not a focus of this deck, you can believe that some of our creatures are going to hit the bin, and Embodiment of Agonies can become a very big flyer whenever he enters. Next up, we have 3 Deathtouch token creators in Ophiomancer, Hornet Queen, and Hornet Nest. Ophiomancer for 2 and a black says at the beginning of each upkeep, if you control no snakes, you put a 1/1 black snake creature token with Deathtouch onto the battlefield. This is essentially going to allow us to have a 1/1 Deathtouch defender at all times. And Hornet Queen just got the reprint in the Commander product, says flying and Deathtouch on the body, but whenever Hornet Queen enters the battlefield, we get to put 4 1/1 green insect flyers with Deathtouch onto the battlefield. So for only 7 CMC, we get 5 Deathtouch bodies, all with flying. And Hornet Nest is going to create the same token, but it is going to create that many 1/1 tokens whenever it takes damage. So if we cast Hornet Nest and someone Blasphemous Axe, you better believe we are getting 13 1/1 green flyers with Deathtouch. Moving right along, we have Ocarina Assassin, the inspiration behind this deck, Hooded Blightfang, and Poison Tip Archer. Ocarina Assassin for only 1 and a black green has Deathtouch, and all creatures able to block Ocarina Assassin do so. This means if we need to get in for some damage with other creatures, we can use Ocarina to suck in all those defenders and force them to block. Or if there's a creature our opponent is holding back, trying not to attack with, we can force them to block with it and then kill it using the Assassin's Deathtouch. We already talked a little bit about Hooded Blightfang in the beginning, but this creature is a 1/4 with Deathtouch, so this is going to be able to live through a lot of things. Whenever a creature you control with Deathtouch attacks, each opponent is going to lose 1 life and you are going to gain 1 life. And whenever a creature you control with Deathtouch deals damage to a Planeswalker, we can destroy that Planeswalker instantly. I love Hooded Blightfang so much because not only do we not have to actually connect, all we have to do is attack. It is going to drain all of our opponents at the same time, and we could absolutely win just on a combat attack before any damage is even resolved. And then Poison Tip Archer for 2 black green has reach and Deathtouch, so it can protect us against those big flyers, but also says whenever another creature dies, each opponent loses 1 life. So another drain effect that we can use to kill all of our opponents at the same time. And rounding out our Deathtouch team, we got Glissa the Trader, Foulmire Knight, and Nightshade Peddler. Glissa the Trader has First Strike and Deathtouch, so a very aggressive attacker or defender if we need to. It says whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, we can put any artifact card from our graveyard back into our hand. We obviously don't have many artifacts, but we do have a few select artifact creatures that we will be able to return. Foulmire Knight for only 1 black is a 1/1 with Deathtouch, but also provides us the ability to draw a card and lose a life for only 2 mana and a black at instant speed. And then lastly, Nightshade Peddler has Soul Bond, and as long as Nightshade Peddler is paired with another creature, both of them will get Deathtouch. Moving right along, let's take a look at all of the creatures we will be summoning that are going to help us ramp out and get to those big spells as quick as possible. Starting off with 3 of our mana dorks in Elvish Mystic, Fyndhorn Elves, and Llanowar Elves. You know them, they're tried and true. 1 mana, they come down on turn 1 and tap for a green. Then we have 3 more mana dorks that provide us a little bit of flexibility in Elves of Deep Shadow, Leyline Prowler, and Boreal Druid. Elves of Deep Shadow is going to be able to tap for a black. Leyline Prowler has the ability to tap for any color, but also does come with Deathtouch and Lifelink, so if we ever need to use him to attack or defend, we can gain some life and kill creatures off with it. And Boreal Druid for only 1 green, just got the reprint in Mystery Boosters, taps for 1 generic mana. The great thing about all these dorks is they can come down on turn 1, allowing us to get to those 3/4 cost spells as fast as possible. Next up, we have 3 ETB creatures that are going to help us get out additional lands in Farhaven Elf, Wood Elves, and Spring Bloom Druid. Farhaven Elf, whenever it enters the battlefield, we get to go search our library for any basic land and put it onto the battlefield tapped. Wood Elves allows us to go get a forest and put that onto the battlefield not tapped. And Spring Bloom Druid, a harrow on a stick, says whenever it enters the battlefield, we sack a land, go search for 2 lands, bring them into the battlefield tapped. While the 3 CMC for only 1 additional land isn't really ideal, having that 1/1 body in play can absolutely make a big deal with this deck. And then we have a couple creatures that are going to have on death triggers in Solemn Simulacrum and Sakura Tribe Elder. Solemn Simulacrum, we all know it, we all love it. The sad robot enters the battlefield. We can search for any basic land and put it into play tapped, and whenever it dies, we get to draw a card. And Sakura Tribe Elder, for only 2 mana, 1 and a green, we can sacrifice it to go search for a basic land and put that card directly into play tapped. And lastly, rounding out our ramp team, we have a couple mana reducers in Nylea, Keen-Eyed, and Goreclaw, Terror of Quasisma. The new Nylea has Indestructible, comes into play for only 3 and a green as long as our devotion is less than 5, she isn't a creature, and says all creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. This is great because all we have are creatures. For 2 and a green though, we can also then reveal the top card of our library, and if it's a creature card, we get to put it into our hand. Otherwise, we put it into our graveyard. Essentially with Nylea's ability, we either get to draw a card or bin a land. This is an absolutely strong effect in this deck and will help us keep our hand full. It's also important to note that Nylea's ability isn't a tap ability, so we can activate this as many times as we have the mana to do so. And then Goreclaw, 3 and a green, comes down, says creatures you cast with power 4 or greater cost 2 less to cast. And on top of this mana reduction, whenever Goreclaw attacks, each creature we control with power 4 or greater gets +1/+1 and gains trample until the end of turn. This absolutely can and will come into play if we have Goreclaw on the field because we are running a ton of creatures with the power 4 or greater. But moving on now, let's take a look at all the creatures we're going to be summoning, giving us awesome effects that are going to help us keep our hands full and allow us to continue to draw more cards. Starting things off with Beast Whisperer, Soul of the Harvest, and Vizier of the Menagerie. Beast Whisperer, a great new card, get out the reprint in Commander 20, says whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. Pretty simple, we're going to be casting a ton of creatures, and the best part about Beast Whisperer is they don't even have to enter the battlefield, it's on cast. Soul of the Harvest, similar effect, except whenever another non-token creature ETBs, you get to draw a card. Soul of the Harvest also has trample, so we will be able to attack with it later on in the game. And Vizier of the Menagerie for 3 and a green, coming out of Amonkhet, you may look at the top card of your library, you may cast the top card of your library if it's a creature card, and you may spend mana as though it were any color to cast that creature spell. So Vizier is going to allow us to essentially play cards from the top of our deck as long as it remains in play. Next up, we have a few card draw on death creatures in Harvester of Souls, Midnight Reaper, and Chevelle, Bane of Monsters, straight out of Ikoria. Harvester of Souls for 4 and double black has Deathtouch, and whenever another non-token creature dies, that's any creature, you may draw a card. If you didn't notice, Harvester of Souls and Soul of the Harvest are almost identical, with one being on ETB and one being on death. Fun little fact in case you've never put that together. Midnight Reaper, 2 and a black, whenever another non-token creature you control dies, Midnight Reaper is going to deal a damage to you and you get to draw a card. And then Chevelle, getting the new printing, black and green for this legendary creature, has Deathtouch, and at the beginning of your upkeep, if an opponent controls no permanents with bounty counters on them, you get to put a bounty counter out on a target creature or planeswalker any opponent controls. Then, whenever an opponent controls with a bounty counter on it dies, you gain 3 life and draw a card. While Chevelle is definitely not a very reliable source of card draw, does have Deathtouch, can come down early, and will give us some incidental card draw, hopefully. And then we got a couple combat card draw spells in Oakhame Adversary and Orin Frostfang. Oakhame Adversary for 3 and a green says this spell costs 2 less to cast if an opponent controls a green permanent, which is very likely because Commander's a green format, and it has Deathtouch. Whenever Oakhame Adversary deals combat damage to a player, you get to draw a card. So anytime we can get in with this Elf Warrior, we will get to draw a card, and having Deathtouch makes it much less likely to be blocked. Orin Frostfang, 3 and double green, printed in the last Commander product. Attacking creatures you control have Deathtouch. Then, whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. This is any combat damage dealt by any of your creatures. So if we're able to summon a bunch of those insect tokens, get in with 3 or 4 of them, we are going to draw a ton of cards. Next up, I have a couple what I like to call passive card draw creatures in the Gitrog monster and Thorn of the Black Rose. The Gitrog monster, a very strong 5-drop, has Deathtouch, and at the beginning of your upkeep, we sacrifice the Gitrog monster unless we sacrifice a land. Then we can play an additional land on each of our turns, and whenever one or more land cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere, you get to draw a card. This means at the beginning of each upkeep, we're going to sack a land, draw 2 cards instead of just the 1 for the turn, and then we can play an additional land. With all the effects and creatures we have that are going to allow us to put lands into our graveyard, the Gitrog monster can absolutely be an all-star for our card draw. And Thorn of the Black Rose, only 3 and a black. We get this human assassin with Deathtouch. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch. The Monarch is a pretty rad ability that I like to introduce into most of the games I'm involved in, and definitely will help us draw cards as long as we're the Monarch. Having an army of Deathtouch creatures also means we are less likely to be attacked, so there's a good chance we can hold on to that Monarch ability as long as we have it in play. But even if we do lose it, we can then attack with our Deathtouchers and most likely get it right back. And then rounding out our card advantage, 2 creatures that are recently printed that I am huge fans of, and that is Vilis Broker of Blood and Mind Leecher. Vilis Broker of Blood is an 8-drop, 8/8 body with flying. Vilis has an activated ability that for only 1 black we can pay 2 life and give a target creature -1/-1 until the end of turn. But the real ability that we want to pay attention to here is that whenever we lose life, we get to draw that many cards. So essentially with Vilis in play, we pay 1 black, lose 2 life, draw 2 cards, and get to give a creature -1. And we can activate that ability as much as we want and draw an absolute insane amount of cards. Mind Leecher, 4 black, a mutate creature coming out of the most recent Otrimi Commander deck. It has flying, and it says whenever this creature mutates, you exile the top card of each opponent's library face down. You may look at those cards, and you may play them for as long as they remain exiled. Mind Leecher is going to allow us to play lands. We're going to be able to cast spells that we steal, and while it's not true card advantage, those 3 cards are definitely going to help us have a leg up if we ever need the resources. Not to mention, if we can put a 5/5 flying mutated creature onto one of our small Deathtouch creatures, we will then have a big threat in play as well. Moving right along, let's take a look at all of the creatures we're going to be playing to help us control the board and remove the big worst threats in play. Starting off with Acidic Slime, Gemrazor, and Noxious Gearhulk. Acidic Slime, 3 and double green, has Deathtouch, bada bing bada boom, and whenever it enters the battlefield, we can destroy any target artifact, enchantment, or land. Acidic Slime is really that catch-all, going to help us get rid of anything we need to. Gemrazor has Mutate, and whenever this creature mutates, we can destroy any target artifact or enchantment. And then Noxious Gearhulk, this artifact creature has Menace, and whenever it ETBs, we get to destroy any other target creature. And if that creature is destroyed, we gain life equal to its toughness, so a little bit of life gain on a removal creature. Next up, we have what I would like to refer to as quote-unquote board wipes in Massacre Worm, Night Incarnate, and Hythania the Cruel. Massacre Worm getting the reprint in the most recent standard set, Core 21, cost 3 and triple black, says whenever it enters the battlefield, creatures your opponents control get -2/-2 until the end of turn. So this is a one-sided effect. And whenever a creature an opponent controls is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, that player is going to lose 2 life. So not only is it going to help us clear out those small creatures, but also going to ping down our opponents. Night Incarnate, 4 and a black, has Evoke for 3 and a black, has Deathtouch, and whenever it leaves the battlefield, all creatures are going to get -3/-3 until the end of turn. While Night Incarnate definitely does affect our side of the board, we can cast it for only 4 mana and clear a lot of the board out. And lastly, Hythania the Cruel, 4 black with Deathtouch. This legendary Gorgon has Monstrosity 3. So that means for 6 black, we can activate this ability to make Hythania monstrous. She'll get 3 +1/+1 counters, and whenever she becomes monstrous, we destroy all non-Gorgon creatures. This is most likely going to clear out the entire board minus Hythania herself. Next up, we got 2 bomb ETB effects in Bane of Progress and Terastodon. Bane of Progress, a real MVP in this deck for 4 and double green. Whenever it enters, we destroy all artifacts and enchantments and put a +1 counter on it for each permanent destroyed this way. Given that we are running virtually no artifacts or enchantments, Bane of Progress is just going to be a huge devastation to all of our opponent's side of the board. And Terastodon, 8 mana, whenever ETBs, we can destroy up to 3 target non-creature permanents. Terastodon is going to absolutely help us get rid of any of those pesky enchantments, artifacts, or even lands that we need to 3 at a time. And rounding out our removal team, we have Ambush Viper, Polukranos, and Ulvenwald Tracker. Ambush Viper, I like to think as a 2-cost removal instant. It has Flash and it has Deathtouch. This means if we ever get attacked, we can flash in Ambush Viper, put it as a blocker, and most likely kill the thing that's attacking us. Polukranos, brand new card coming out of Theros Beyond Death, says whenever it enters the battlefield, we get 6+1 counters on it. Then we can pay 1 black-green to make it fight another target creature, and we can make it escape for 4 black-green, letting us cast it from our graveyard back to the battlefield, and when it escapes, it comes back with 12 counters. This constant fight ability, if we do put Deathtouch on Polukranos, will absolutely dominate the board. And lastly, Ulvenwald Tracker, kind of a weird include, but for only 1 green, we get a 1/1 Human Shaman that says for 1 and a green, we can tap it to make target creature we control fight another creature. A fight between any creature with Deathtouch is considered, in my eyes, any removals that we want to. We can make our Ambush Viper or anything with Deathtouch deal any amount of damage to that creature, and they'll both die in the process. I thought this was a pretty neat trick. For only 2 mana, we can activate Ulvenwald Tracker every round and get rid of any big threat in play. And lastly, rounding out this deck, we have all of our utility creatures that we are going to bring into play and really bring this deck together. Starting off with 3 recursion pieces in Eternal Witness, Green Warden of Marasa, and Genesis. Each one of these are going to allow us to get a creature card back from our graveyard to our hand when we need it, and then recur them into play. 2 more recursion creatures we're going to be running in Ramunap Excavator and Phyrexian Delver. Ramunap Excavator is going to let us play lands from our graveyard, so if we've milled anything or destroyed any of our lands, we can bring them back with him in play. And Phyrexian Delver, 3 in double black. Whenever it ETBs, we get to return any creature card from our graveyard to the battlefield and lose life equal to its CMC. A great way to bring back anything we need at the right time. Always remember, life is just a resource to get to the finish line. Next up, we have a couple creatures that are going to help protect our board state in Slippery Bogbonder and Vigor. Slippery Bogbonder has Flash, has Hexproof itself, and says whenever it ETBs, we get to put a Hexproof counter on a target creature. Then we can move any number of counters from among creatures we control onto that creature. This is going to allow us to create a true monster with its effect and keep anything safe from any targeted effects or removal. And Vigor, getting the reprint treatment in Mystery Booster, has Trample, a 6/6 body for 6 mana, and if damage would be dealt to another creature we control, we simply prevent that damage. Then we get to put a +1 counter on that creature for each damage prevented. When Vigor is put into the graveyard, we shuffle him back into our library. This is an absolute insane way to keep all of our creatures safe. We can swing in safely knowing our creatures can't be affected. Also, I should mention, Vigor mixed with Polukranos means we can fight as much as we want as long as we have the mana. A really strong combo. And then another combo I'm a huge fan of include Yeva, Nature's Herald, and Seedborn Muse. Both of these creatures independently offer a very strong effect, but together they can just do some incredible things. Yeva's going to allow us to have Flash on all of our green creatures, has Flash herself, and then Seedborn Muse, we all know it, we all hate it. 3 green, untap all permanents you control during each other player's untap step. This means with these 2 in play, we can essentially flash out any creature we have the mana for every single turn. A real bomb if you can get this online. And then lastly, a couple more big boys to help bring this deck together in Enray's Forerunner and Woodland Bellower. Enray's Forerunner, definitely one of our potential win conditions, has Vigilance, has Trample, has Haste, and whenever Enray's Forerunner enters the battlefield, all of our creatures are going to get +2/+2, gain Vigilance, and Trample until end of turn. With a big board state, this is just a game ender. Obviously, you could run Craterhoof instead of Enray's Forerunner, but Enray's is a great budget option. And Woodland Bellower, 4 green, whenever ETBs, we get to go get any 3 CMC non-legendary creature and put it straight onto the battlefield. But that does bring us to the end. We've seen all the creatures. We know exactly what we're going to be casting. Let's take a look at how this deck breaks down inside the 99 exactly. We have 11 removal creature effects and abilities. We've got 12 creatures with some sort of card draw or card advantage, And our ramp in this deck, extremely strong with all the mana dorks with 13 different effects and spells. And the power level for this deck, we've put it at a solid 5. This deck definitely isn't going to combo off or win out of nowhere. This is a lot of fair Magic play, and that means you can sit down, play it casually at just about any table, and have a good time doing it. Also, whenever you show a companion, everyone knows what you're about to play, and when you say you're running an all-creature deck, it will definitely catch people off guard. Winning with this deck can be broken down into a few ways. Number one, we can drain our opponents out using things like Hooded Blightfang to deal damage to all of our opponents at one time and gain life in doing so. If that doesn't get the job done, we can rely on our commanders to chip away at our opponent's life totals aggressively. Virtus is going to deal half damage. That could be 20 all in one hit. And lastly, we have cards like God Eternal Ronus or Endray's Forerunner to pump our whole board state up at one time and give our opponents a nice big alpha strike. Some budget alternatives for this deck: Vampire Nighthawk, Soul of Innistrad, an archetype of finality. Vampire Nighthawk, an awesome keyword Deathtoucher for only 3 mana. Soul of Innistrad gonna allow us to return some creature cards from our graveyard to our hand and has Deathtouch himself, so bonus. An archetype of finality, gonna give all of our creatures Deathtouch and deny Deathtouch from all of our opponents. The big thing is that we want all of our creatures to synergize well together. And then if you are looking to make this deck a little more competitive, you can run cards like Fiend Artisan, Nyxbloom Ancient, and Fauna Shaman. Fiend Artisan is going to allow us to sack a creature and go tutor up the proper creature we need. Nyxbloom Ancient is going to triple up our mana, and Fauna Shaman, for only a green, we can tap it down, discard a creature card, and search our library for any creature card and put it into our hand. This effect can be insane, letting us find whatever answer we need whenever we need it. But there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. This is the 64 creature Umori Deathtouch deck tech. I hope you have enjoyed it. I can't wait to spring 64 creatures on my opponents and let them know that I'm running Umori in the companion slot. But let me know what you guys thought down in the comments below. Is this a viable deck? Would you do something like this? Maybe artifacts, maybe enchantments. Let me know what creatures I missed that would be good additions. We did try to keep this in about a $200 budget. So yeah, let me know what you thought. Hey, if you liked this video, make sure you hit that like button. And if you're new here, maybe consider subscribing. Thank you guys so much for checking out the video. If you want to follow us over on Twitter, you can find us there at Deathtouch. We have our Patreon now. If you want to go the extra step to support the channel, it helps us to keep making awesome videos like this. You can find us on Patreon, Commander Tactics. And of course, as I mentioned in the beginning, check out our Discord. Link is down in the description and below. Thanks so much, guys. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you for the next one.